Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon on behalf of everyone associated with the setup of this first live webinar, All Policies for a Healthy Europe. It's a great pleasure welcoming you here. Well, first of all, we really do hope that you and your loved ones are doing fine, because if COVID-19 learned us something, that is that the idea of promoting health is more important than ever. The topic we are tackling today is more relevant than ever, and that environmental health and human health are really linked. 19 also showed that the degradation of ecosystem also affects our health. So, due to the ongoing corona crisis, and to give the good example, we are having this event online, but we do hope it will be interesting and interacting. And talking about interaction, we would like you to join the conversation. And first of all, we would like to hear from you. So normally in your latest confirmation email, you had the link for which you could participate to our questions and answers. So join us at slido.com by the code 97308, or just go to the QR code and having a look at the first question we prepared for you today about tackling pollution. Also, you can see our hashtags we are using. There's a hashtag Healthy Europe, hashtag Healthy Environment, or you can have a look, of course, at our account at Wellbeing EU. Well, when we are having the discussion about the zero pollution, the first question we would like to launch for you is, why is tackling pollution important to you? Is it important for protecting biodiversity? Is it important for eating healthier and more sustainable food? Do you think that tackling pollution is important for air quality or for preventing diseases? I think it's time to cast your vote and really to join our live conversation on Twitter and the social media. So please, ladies and gentlemen, let us know what you think, and let me give you the time in the meantime to go through the agenda. We will first, ladies and gentlemen, have the honor of having our keynote speech by Mr. Andriukaitis. He is the former EU Commissioner for Health and Food Safety. So, then afterwards, we will have the Finnish member of the European Parliament, Mrs. Sirpa Pietikainen. She's actually host of the event, and she will introduce the topic at hand. So in meanwhile, you will still have the chance, the opportunity to give us your answers on the question why tackling the pollution is so important. But as you can see, we are having a real interesting program, and I hope that Mrs. Sirpa Pietikainen is really ready having us as a host of today. Well, hi, hello there. I hope you're doing fine and are really ready for this event. So, ladies and gentlemen, you will see that today we will also have a real exciting and interesting panel discussion. But before, I would like to take the opportunity to show you what the coalition is about, because cross-sectorial coalitions are really essential when it comes to showing the multidimensional determinants, all aspects of health and well-being. So think about commercial, political issues, think about the environment, the economic and social influences. So instead of telling us who we are, we would like to show you who we are. So please join me in watching this video.
70% of Europeans want to see more action at EU level on health and well-being. Our mission is to position citizens' health and well-being at the centre of EU policy making.
We need to better tie health measures to other linked areas such as the environment, climate, digitalization, food and nutrition, pharmaceuticals, and this will be precisely the focus of our synergies within the Commission.
All Policies for a Healthy Europe is an intersectoral initiative that brings together a diverse group of NGOs, think tanks, associations, companies and individuals. We champion a broad and bold vision for health and well-being and see health and well-being as catalysts to a stronger economic model. We seek opportunities for collaboration beyond the healthcare sector. All Policies for a Healthy Europe is keen to support the European Commission's vision for a healthy, climate-neutral, socially inclusive Europe.
And it is the mission to position the citizens' health and well-being at the heart of the EU policy making. So, for those who are just joining us right now, please join the conversation on Twitter by the hashtag Healthy Environment or the hashtag Healthy Europe. And don't forget to go to Slido, where we will also have a question box later on during our panel discussion. But first, let's have a look at the results. You had the chance to cast your votes about the question, why is tackling pollution so important to you? And I think it was a close call between air quality and preventing diseases. Well, air pollution is indeed one of the biggest threats for the environment. It affects everyone. Think about humans, animals, crops, cities, forests. So I think this is also something we want to highlight today. And then we see preventing diseases. Well, preventing diseases is something very close to air quality, because a better air quality will also help us preventing diseases. But I think due to this close call, this will be a very interesting panel discussion later on. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time to introduce the topic at hand today. So, Mrs. Pieti Kainen, for the moment, the floor is yours.
This very topical and interesting event that I hope will lead a massive and massive support for health for all subject and raising EU competencies in the area of health, focusing better our policies in health, all of our policies in health, and indeed having a better and more mature aspect about planetary health. What I mean by this is that quite often we look the health, the diseases as separate cases. It might be your heart, it might be your neurological conditions, it might be your asthmas, it might be your diabetes. And what we would indeed need to see is that in sick planet you can't have healthy people. Everything needs to start from the fact that we understand what impact the biodiversity has, for example, for asthmas and for our immune systems. How important is the air quality for not only asthmatic people, but for those ones suffering from GARD conditions, elderly people in general, or exposing children and people for different kinds and types of cancers. What about the toxins in your environment? Starting from pesticides, multiple chemicals, chemical cocktails. If you do not intervene on those, how do you intervene with endocrine disruptor impact that is multiple to NCDs for cancers and other conditions? And how do you actually make good cancer policies without erasing those harmful and risky chemicals and substances from our environments? How do you take serious the climate change? And imagine what is the impact of the climate change when you add it for these other issues. Think what is the impact for lungs, for elderly people, for people with cardiac insufficiencies, for people in weaker conditions or elderly people with new kind of diseases spreading around, with malnutrition. And yes, indeed, the climate change impact on our mental health. And we can see how stressful the COVID-19 already has been for many people. What about then when or if the climate change is really going to challenge our everyday lives and ability to live normal life not to talk about different diseases, malnutrition, or the lack of drinking water. So we are talking about very serious issues, and that's why we need to see the planetary connections of the health. Plus, then there are, of course, a plethora of other issues. How the health is impacted by what we eat, and of course, we can have a choices of our own. But what about if the amount of trans fats or very highly processed food or amount of sugars that we have in everyday food? Is that only the matter of personal choice if 70% of the kids under school age is getting half of their calorie intake per day by sugars in their breakfast? And not to talk about ketchups, mustards, and many other substances that are stuffed with sugars. We need to take the health aspect in our everyday life, how the cities are walkable, how our offices and working life is supportive to our health instead of being a risk or a burden for our health. And I could go on and on. But what is my point is we need planetary health, we need one health concept, we need to join with public and private forces, NGOs, research, politicians, member states representatives, and people in different member states, and all the patient organizations to work and fight for one health concept. And yes, we can do it. And yes, we can make the change. And I think that this is one of the very important kickstarts of this work. So I'm very eager to hear what you have said. And with these words, I'm very happy to welcome our former commissioner, Mr. Andriukaitis. Thank you for the cooperation I had with you already during the last policy term in European Parliament. And now we are turning to you and turn our ears and brains to hear what you have to say. And once again, on my side, welcome. I hope to be in contact with you, and I'm very happy to host this very important webinar.
Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Pietikainen. I'm sure that your expertise will have a great added value when it comes to our panel discussion later on. So, ladies and gentlemen, we now had an introduction about the topic at hand today. So maybe we can go back to your votes, your results about the question, why is it so important tackling pollution? I see the results have changed now. It is quite obvious that air quality has 34%, because actually that's also what pops up in mind first. When we talk about pollution, we think about air pollution and air quality. But actually, and that is what we also would like to highlight today, that pollution is more than air quality. It indeed affects preventing diseases, protecting and going for more biodiversity, and eating healthier and more sustainable food. So that is also something our panel will be discussing later on. So I hope you still do join us on Slido by the 97308, or why not join the discussion on Twitter and social media by the hashtag Healthy Europe and the hashtag Healthy Environment. You can also have a look at our account, which is the All Wellbeing EU. So today we are really placing the citizens' health at the center, at the heart, of course, of what the EU policy making is. So within a couple of minutes, we will launch the panel discussion, and you will have the opportunity to ask us your questions, to put them in the question box. But ladies and gentlemen, today we are also discussing in detail the outcomes of the policy paper of the Environment Working Group of our coalition, All Policies for a Healthy Europe. So before we are proceeding with the agenda for today, I think it's really important to have a look and to see what this policy paper will highlight. Healthy Europe, hashtag healthy environment. So this is the live webinar for all policies for a healthy Europe. And live is always very exciting. So for the moment, we are trying having our connection with Mr. Andriukaitis for highlighting the importance of, yes, a health in all policies approach, because that's what it's all about. But it seems like he's having some technical problems. So first of all, I would like to explain how you can participate in a couple of minutes and putting your questions in our question box, for which you had the links. And I would ask you to challenge our panelists during the panel discussion we will have later on, because we also have some the panel discussion. So really would appreciate having your input, your remarks, opinions and questions about how we can really put citizens' health at the center, at the heart of the EU policy making. So you can send your question by filling in your name, entering your question and sending it to us. And then our moderator for the panel discussion, Mrs. Tsvetelina Filipova, will address the panelists with your question. So don't hesitate really to challenge our panel and panel discussion. And then for now, I think it's time to pass the mic and give the floor to Tsvetelina Filipova from the Institute for European Environmental Policy. So hi, Tsvetelina. Good afternoon. Hello. So, as mentioned before, I hope that as a chair of the working group are ready to panel discussion. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Virginie. I'm delighted to be facilitator of today's panel. And I'm very happy to welcome all its panelists. The panel will be consisting of Ms. Sirpa Pietikainen, who is our host and an MEP in the European Party, and Ms. Jutta Paulus, Green MEP, Mr. Francois Wackenhut from European Commission, Director of Clean Air Unit, DG Environment, and Ms. Simona Guagliardo from the European Policy Centre. Very, very happy to welcome you all on this panel. One of our panelists, MEP Ms. Sara Cerdas, unfortunately was not able to join us today. She, however, wants to share a short message and her views on the topic with you. I would ask my colleagues to share now a brief video from Ms. Cerdas. Could you please put the video on? Virginie, do you hear me?
Yes,
I hope
yes,
we are
I'm
not
hearing
running
you.
any technical difficulties.
Video. Yes, we will prepare the video from Mrs. Sara Cerdas. It's coming right away.
I'll give another moment for my colleagues to react.
Hello everyone, and thank you very much for Policies for a Healthy Europe for the invitation to be present, even if it's through this video. We know that the environment is one of the major determinants of health and well-being, and it is estimated to account for almost of the 20% of all deaths in the WHO European region. Hence, it's important that we talk about this zero pollution ambition, given the intrinsic link between human health and the environment. We need to focus on prevention, we need to improve health determinants, and this is important and very much crucial in order for us to have the greatest and the best health outcomes and to reduce the burden of disease that is caused by environmental determinants of health. As one of the shadow rapporteurs for the EU for Health program, the new program for health, presented by the European Commission, I am very much focused on guaranteeing that prevention is at its core, including together hand in hand with health promotion. With the Zero Pollution Action Plan for air, water and soil, it needs to be aligned not only with the EU for Health program, but also with other strategies that are being produced right now. And I'm talking specifically with the chemical strategy, in order for us to use the risk associated, to reduce the risk associated with the production and usage of chemicals, hazardous chemicals, in order for us to protect the people and the environment from these substances. This strategy should always also be in line with the farm to fork strategy. And here I'd like to highlight the important need to reduce the usage of antimicrobials. As we know, this is one of the biggest health crises that we're facing right now, together probably with COVID-19, of course. But this usage in antimicrobials in the environment needs to be reduced in order for us to have better chances with the fight against antimicrobial resistance. Also, the Zero Pollution Action Plan should also be in line with the EU biodiversity strategy, and this is important in order for us to restore the degraded ecosystems at land and sea across the whole European Union that have been degraded due to human action. This event is an important opportunity to hear citizens, to hear important stakeholders, to improve the discussion in these topics, and also to produce policies with citizens and their well-being at its core. So once again, thank you very much, and I wish a very profitable discussion.
Thank you very much indeed for Ms. Serda's speech. It is very much to the point. Indeed, the work of the Environment Working Group of all policies for health environment is centered on the best ways to mainstream and integrate environment, health and well-being in the new policies of the European Commission. And we have decided to focus our work around the zero pollution ambition. But we are looking into three elements, as also Ms. Serda has mentioned. We're looking into environmental risk factors and disease prevention. Environment factors being one of the major determinant of human health. And we're looking into impact of pollution on non-communicable diseases, including the beating cancer plan. We're also looking into sustainability of food production chains and impact on healthy food and on well-being and on healthy diets within the farm to fork strategy and beyond. And we are also looking here and learning from the current, from the experience of the biodiversity strategy, focusing on adverse effects of biodiversity loss and degradation on human health. I would, with this introduction, continue with specific questions to our panel. And my first question would be to Ms. Huta Paulus. As a member of the ENVI Committee of the European Parliament and healthcare professional, in your view, can you say that the Zero Pollution Action Plan effectively will address environmental pressure on public health? Can you be so kind to reflect on that?
The strength, yes. I managed to unmute myself. Always new experiences when having a new device. Well, when it comes to the Zero Pollution Action Plan, actually, this plan is overdue because already in the 7th Environmental Action Program, there was the promise of the toxic-free environment, of course, and this promise was never fulfilled by the old commission. So now with Commissioner Sinkevičius being in charge for the environmental issues, I really have great hopes that he will put pressure also on his colleagues in order to deliver here. It has already been said that we will see the first step in the sustainable chemistry strategy, which is going to be due this year. And we will be voting today, actually, in the ENVI committee on the initiative report of the European Parliament to this chemical strategy. And there are a lot of very concrete demands by Parliament because, of course, the Zero Pollution Action Plan is linked with so many other issues. You already mentioned the biodiversity strategy. We know that pollution is severely affecting wildlife. Of course, among the most affected are the animals at the top of the food chain, because accumulating pollution will affect their immune system, their reproductive health, but also those smallest ones at the beginning of the food chain, because, for example, they are so much affected by microplastics, and 500,000 tons of microplastics are entering the environment in Europe alone. And this is really an issue which has to be tackled as soon as possible. So these would be the effects on biodiversity. We, of course, have also the effects on health, as we have seen in this crisis, basically, when we had the regions where we had the highest fatality rates were the regions with the highest air pollution. So I think this was really a wake-up call that we must act on pollution and we must protect people's health in a comprehensive way. And let me just bring one last issue when it comes to the Zero Pollution Action Plan. We want, with the Green Deal, we want to transform our economy into a sustainable economy, meaning it is resource efficient, a circular economy. But a circular economy only makes sense if we don't have toxic, hazardous substances in those forever to use products. We had just last year there was a vote on PVC recycling, where the original intention was, well, let's look not so sharply at the lead content, because then we could not use the old PVC, because back then when it was produced, there were such high levels of lead being still allowed. So that shows very clearly, in order to get rid of those legacy components, we have to work for a zero pollution environment already when we're designing our products. I'll leave it at that for the moment, because there are a lot of other people who want to speak, I'm sure.
Great, thanks a lot. I fully agree with you that now emphasis should be placed on the life cycle assessment of materials and products, so that their impact is considered throughout the whole existence of them on our planet. And indeed, as mentioned also in our active poll, it is widely recognized that air pollution is largely the most important environment determinant for health. But there are indeed many others, including, as you said, chemicals in our food, in water, pesticides, and plastic. So I would like to address Mr. Vakkenhut with a different question. What is the ambition of the Commission with the Zero Pollution Action Plan? The European Green Deal has committed to bringing EU air quality standards in line with the World Health Organization air quality guidelines. Can you elaborate on how the Commission is planning to achieve this commitment and what health outcomes this would bring? What do you think?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be joining this eminent panel and to be part of this conversation about what are truly exciting developments. So you put actually two questions to me. One focusing more on the zero pollution ambition per se and the extent to which it will actually be ambitious. And then the specific point on air quality and the alignment with the WHO standards. So to take the first one, on zero pollution ambition level, well, I think you've seen that with the overall lineup of initiatives that the Commission has developed in the context of the Green Deal, and some of these are already on the table now and have been mentioned by several of the speakers, from zero pollution to biodiversity to climate neutrality, we have set a very high level of ambition. And I can only confirm that this will also apply to the zero pollution action plan. And in doing so, we'll look at two dimensions, if you like. One, which is linked to a number of deliverables that are stemming from our legislation as already in place and as has been reviewed and evaluated over the past years. That is the case of the ambient air quality legislation, but it's also the case when it comes to industrial emissions. It's the case when it comes to water. It's the case when it comes to soil, where we don't have legislation on the table that we would have wanted to put on the table already a long time ago, but we're preventing from doing that due to opposition from some parties, notably in the Council. So there is a lot of interest from our side in looking at the various elements which have been worked on already, but there's also a very strong interest in looking at how we can integrate better the overall scattered aspects of pollution across the overall policy outlook and legislative outlook of the Commission as a whole, going way beyond DG Environment. And that is very much in line with what your initiative is trying to deliver, looking across the board, across delivery, that will actually ensure that we do not continue to have a framework where some of the issues are looked at deliberately and some others are not always integrated into a full analysis of environmental health impacts. And clearly we also need to reduce pollution at source across the board. So this is what I would say when it comes to the overall package. But of course that also requires that we have a better knowledge and a better understanding of the evidence around zero pollution and around pollution reduction and how to tackle it best through the most effective action. So that is also foreseen as part of our analysis. Now, moving on to the air dimension, it was referred to several times as the single most important environmental health determinant. It clearly is the case, which is not to say that others do not matter. Of course, this is something that we plead for in terms of action on other matters as well. And when it comes to the current standards that we have, we concluded a fitness check of our legislation in November 2019 that clearly established that we've been partially effective in delivering reductions of levels of air pollution in Europe, but there are aspects on which we can do better. And one of the aspects that has been emphasized, rightly so, is that for some of the pollutants, we do not have the same level of ambition as the current WHO guidelines. That is, for instance, the case for particulate matter. As we speak now, you know about the commitment that was made in the European Green Deal, that there is, I'm quoting exactly the language, that will notably propose to revise air quality standards to align them more closely with the WHO recommendations. And those recommendations are being updated, reviewed as we are considering them. So we believe very much in an evidence-based process. So our understanding is that during the course of 2021, hopefully as soon as possible in 2021, the WHO will put on the table updated guidelines, and those will be there for governments such as national ones, but also the European Union, to look at overall impacts on our legislation. And then from then on, from the evidence that is on the table, we will obviously have to go through very serious analysis of all the impacts of potential degrees of alignment or closer alignment, as we refer to in the Green Deal, in view of being more effective, more efficient in the way we tackle the challenges ahead of us, and clearly reducing adverse health impacts of air pollution, as is in line with the platform that you're presenting, will be one of the core objectives for us. So you can be certain that we will be looking at this agenda with the clear determination to improve the overall health situation of our citizens. And as you know, air pollution today in Europe is still, unfortunately, causing about 400,000 premature deaths in the European Union alone. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Indeed, our initiative is very much striving to support science-based and evidence-based policy development. So as an initiative, we'll be very happy to continue cooperating with the Commission and provide that background. And indeed, as well, I'm joining you in saying that wide stakeholder and relevant stakeholder engagement is crucial for ensuring that the integration is done consistently and throughout all the relevant policies. in a way that it will be actionable and realistic. And with that, I would like to address our next panelist, Ms. Simona Gagliardo. Simona, All Policies for Healthy Europe also focuses on improving citizens' well-being. In your view, how can environmental policy truly impact European society, its health and well-being? How can the EU better take into account health well-being and integrate it in its associated policies? Can you elaborate on that? Thank you.
Thank you, Svetlina. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. And I would also like to thank you for organizing this very interesting event and for inviting me to contribute. To get to your question, I will address it. I will address first the environmental dimension of it, and I think, and I also agree with everything that has been said. I think that EU policies really need to address the challenges that pollution and environmental degradation they pose to societal and citizens' well-being. And of course, the first step is to inject health considerations into the policy-making process. It has already been said by the other panelists that pollution, in particular air pollution, is a large contributor to disease and premature death worldwide, but also in Europe. Recent data tell us that pollution, all types of pollution, so air pollution, water pollution, and also soil pollution, represent the largest environmental cause of disease and death in the world. And as Mr. Wakenut was mentioning, only in Europe we had around 400,000 deaths each year. So while the vast majority, I would say, of the pollution-related deaths occur in, we have seen that they occur in low-income and middle-income countries around the world. I think that something that we should not forget and we need to stress is that there is not a single country around the globe that is unaffected by pollution. In the end, we are all concerned. I think that the European Union has been very active in these past years in trying to tackle this challenge, but there is room for improvement. We need to do more. Just to mention a few points, also referring back to what Mr. Wakenhut was saying, the Commission has conducted the fitness check of the Ambient Air Quality Directive, and the implementation of this directive has also been assessed by the European Court of Auditors, and has, as Mr. Wakenhut was mentioning, there is room for improvement. We have seen that most member states still do not comply with the existing air quality standards, and at the same time, these standards can be strengthened and aligned with the WHO standards. Also, I want to mention that last week, the Commission published its report on the progress that has been made on the implementation of the NEC directive, on the reduction of national emissions of atmospheric pollutants. And again, what emerges from this assessment is that much more can be done. Member states are lagging. There are some member states lagging behind in the implementation of this directive, and member states at this point need to step up efforts in all the sectors. So against this background, we need to do more. And I think, and I very much agree with what was said, we need to consolidate our knowledge, to increase our knowledge about the linkages that exist between pollution and human health. What are the effects of pollution on human health? We need to better define the burden of disease that is caused by the different types of pollution. And also, I think we need to better understand what are the health effects of new and emerging chemical pollutants. I think that it's also important to increase our knowledge on the impact that pollution has on vulnerable groups, marginalized groups. Another thing that we should work on is trying to strengthen the existing legislation. As was mentioned before, it would be important to align air quality standards, EU air quality standards, to what is being discussed at this point at the WHO level. And as a last point on this environmental dimension, I want to mention that I think it is crucial to put a strong focus on the green transition within the European semester framework. We have seen that one of the main focus of this European semester process is on kickstarting the economic recovery after the crisis. And I think that a focus on the green transition could help both the economic recovery, but at the same time the green transition. So in its country-specific recommendation, the Commission has put a strong emphasis on investments in environmental infrastructure, for example, on sustainable transport infrastructure, or for example, also on renovation of buildings. This could be a way to sustain the economic recovery and at the same time moving towards a greener economy. So I would like now to take a few moments to reflect on how can the EU can better take into account health and well-being in all other policies. We know that healthy populations are the foundation of well-functioning and resilient societies and economies, and this is a truth I believe that has become even more visible now during these past months, as Europe has been faced with an unprecedented public health emergency, the COVID-19. This emergency has then turned into an unprecedented economic and social emergency. So we know that a range of different factors have an influence on the health status of the population. We have seen and we have been discussing during these past months that physical determinants like the natural environment, they have a clear impact on human health, but it's not the only one. There are many other factors that play a role in determining the health status of the individuals. For example, social determinants, and I'm referring here to employment and working conditions, or the organization of health systems, or again, individual behaviors have an impact on health. And here we can refer to tobacco and alcohol use, to nutrition, physical activity, and all of this. So all of these factors need to be taken into consideration if we want to ensure people's good health. And I think the time has come for us to embed health in the broader concept of well-being. This interlinkage, the interlinkage between health and well-being, and the understanding that well-being is a driver for sustainable economic development is well portrayed in the concept of the economy of well-being, which is also part of the work you are doing. And I think that is now time for both the European Union and its member states to translate this commitment into concrete actions. Yes, and to make possible for this concept of well-being to integrate and shape the policy-making process, both at the EU level and at the national level. And I think I can stop here for the moment.
Thank you very much, Simona. I can't agree more on your firm belief that injection of health consideration in other policies is needed. We call them, we are rather discussing how all those policies can be health-proof and what measures can be put on EU level to consistently introduce a horizontal approach. And one options we were looking at into amendment of the better regulation guidelines, which are still environment, social and economic impact built, while health and well-being can be horizontally integrated and used as a prism for assessment of the upcoming policies. You've mentioned the European semester. Indeed, there are other initiatives there to better integrate health and well-being. And we are aware of many examples around Europe and beyond of countries choosing the approach of having more human health and well-being centered policy development. And I also fully relate with your concerns on the impact to more vulnerable and more marginalized communities who are unfortunately going to pay the bill in a way. You've also mentioned the recovery plans and the strive to have them sustainable, to make us more resilient to potential upcoming crises. And hopefully these would also look horizontally and review how the recovery plans would impact health and well-being. Thank you. Ms. Pietikainen, in the beginning, you were excellent in framing a lot of the considerations that we are having, including the challenges in front of us. In terms of integrating health, environment, and well-being, you've clearly mentioned the need of One Health concept for the planetary health and the joint effort of all the stakeholders to make this happen. With your truly cross-sectorial profile and background, you've been working on economic and monetary affairs, gender equality, circular economy, all of it. How do you think the link between environmental health and human health and well-being should be emphasized across all relevant areas of EU policies? And whether you can elaborate with your additional precise recommendations, because in other conversations of ours, you were excellent in phrasing those out. You have the floor. I see Mr.
I think that Mr. Andriukaitis is there, so I think that we should give the floor for him first, and then I could answer on your question if that is okay.
Yes, sure. If the hosts of the platform are happy to moderate it that way, I will hold my breath and will return.
Well, he might have some connection problems, so it might be a good idea while now he is online to
yes.
give him
Let's
the chance.
take advantage of his presence, Mr. Andriukaitis. Can you take the floor, please, for your intervention?
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Do you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Perfectly, because I also have some problems with connection, and now I don't know because I do not see you. I lost video, but maybe you can help me a little bit. Okay, now I am okay.
I think now we have both sound and picture. So please go ahead.
It's okay. Okay, thank you very much. And first of all, it was not my fault or my mistake, because we lost connection in the morning. The test was very positive, and now I know that I am a little bit in different environment. And of course, because the panel was constructed by very specific topics, and my presentation was more general, And then, generally speaking, I know that I'm very happy that now I see partners, all policies for a healthy Europe. Can you imagine how it sounds? It means that you can see different NGOs, think tanks, associations. It decided to unite forces and to present very important view. Because when we're speaking about health, we need to understand that health is cross-sectorial, intersectorial, and also very holistic one issue. And now I know that the focus of today's discussion is on the links between environment and human health, and more precisely the zero pollution ambitions. And of course, I know that just you all mentioned figures. What does it mean, pollution? How it affects our health? How many deaths? How many NCDs do we have because of environmental pollution? But let's look a little bit more from different angle. You know, we know very well that in Lisbon Treaty, it is enshrined legally binding requirement, legally binding. May I quote, a high level of human health protection shall be ensured in the definition and implementation of all union policies and activities. Is Article 168 of Treaty on Functioning of the EU. But look, it is the same legal requirement which should be implemented at local community level, municipal level, country government level, parliament level. It is for all of us, not only for some NGOs and not only for the Commission. It means that when we are speaking about possibilities to develop holistic, view and methodologies, and have instruments which can, support us all to achieve goals, it will be important to describe what does it mean, health. Look, let me quote the WHO Constitution, okay? Because health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmities. It means that when we are speaking about health, we are speaking about a holistic approach which should, integrate physical, mental, and social well-being criteria. And of course, a lot of actors were responsible to follow those criteria, to have targets, to have instruments, and to implement in real life. Otherwise, when you are speaking with people about health, they always are thinking about diseases. But we just are thinking about a healthy environment, about environmental pollution. Why? Because it affects our healthy resources, not only because it provokes our diseases, but affects us because we have our own healthy resources. We need to have, a healthy workforce. We need to have healthy childhood. We need to have healthy adolescence. We need to have healthy aging. It's not about disease with aging. It is about healthy aging. It is required that once again to ask all of us, what can we do to put forward issues speaking about health? As a former commissioner, I always said I was commissioner for health. It means that for promotion, prevention, and protection of those physical, mental, and social well-being criteria. It means that we need to have active social, mental, and physical policies which can help us to really to see and monitor and measure our status of health, not only status of diseases. And of course, it is very important now to say that the environment and health are intrinsically linked, no doubt. We all know that. But look, what can we do in pushing all actors in the same direction? What we have in our hands? We have in our hands, look, a very important framework convention on tobacco control. Air pollution, tobacco, and all issues around are so interrelated. Second, now we have Paris Climate Agreement. It is also one of the agreements which can help us to build more healthy planet, more healthy society. Of course, speaking about a lot of instruments together. Of course, we know that we have circular economy package, which can help us also to reduce negative impact on our environment, on our biodiversity, and of course also can help us to stay in more healthy environment. It means that we need to pass messages. Don't you do business as usual. We need to change narrative. We need to have, please do business as healthier. Healthy food, one aspect, healthy schools, a second, healthy cities, third, a healthy environment, fourth. And we know very well that we have a lot of determinants around us which can affect our health. Here, some raise questions about vulnerable groups. But vulnerable groups are always under big pressure. Less educated people, they are smoking more, they are drinking more, they are using fast food, junk food, and such all complexity of factors affects their health much more than those who are more educated or middle class people. And we need to understand it that we are speaking about social determinants, also knowing that how many hours people are working in bad working conditions, for example, and less educated people, underpaid job, they are working in those working conditions who are not safe. And it is, you can see a lot of cases when you can really understand how it is big problem with social determinants when we are speaking about healthiness, healthy Europe, and so on. And of course, EU should do more on environment and health. And we have a lot of instruments protecting, for example, animal health, plant health, but we do not have, a regulation speaking about soil health, for example. Especially when we are speaking about, cocktail effects of different chemicals. But soil health is also closely related with biodiversity, with the environment, with pollution, and of course with drinking water. And of course also, but we have no chance to propose, for example, regulation on soil health. Or speaking about drinking water, for example, it is very difficult to explain to our different actors that drinking water is in the end from more environmental angle and less from health policy angle. Food production is closely related with drinking water. And what can we do together that showing that it's not only environmental composition when we are speaking about drinking water, it's also about situations related to healthy food, to access to poor and healthy water. I think that health and well-being as cross-sectorial issues should be much higher on the political agenda. And today, especially today, when COVID shows a real, example, I may remember in my 5 years, European Commission used Europe should be big on big and small on small. Okay, I opposed and I told them, Europe is big on big, but health is a big one issue. And today, small virus shows how it is big. And now people are asking European Union and member states to do more related to health issues. And of course, we need to have some time to discuss, are we capable to discuss issues about European Health Union, where health in all political sectors should be enshrined as imperative, which must be explained with concrete instruments. How and which instrument should we use in environmental area, in transport area, in educational area? How can we present, our holistic concept, helping people to act, defending their healthy environment and their health. And I think now call for action to debate issues related to health union is very timely, and it requires health in all policies narrative and approach. Please look, we have patient-centered approach in healthcare and care. Okay. We have community-based treatment. Okay. We have health in all policies approach. Okay. We have leaving no one behind. Let's join our forces and concepts around those approaches, and let's present more coherent view. But if you will analyze Lisbon Treaty, you can see constitutional asymmetry speaking about environmental issues and speaking about health issues and healthiness issues. And we need to have the time now to debate our issues related to changes in the Lisbon Treaty, because Lisbon Treaty is not so strong in front of health problems. Can I raise a question? The time is now, good time, because we see in the future conference on future of Europe. Let's raise those questions and ask people to be more active defending their health.
You are totally correct, Mr. Kaitis. So for highlighting the importance of a health in all policies, we do not need to do business as usual, but we need to do more and do it more healthier. So thank you very much for this presentation and highlighting the importance of this webinar also. So for now, dear Mrs. Svetlina, I think back to you, because you were still having some questions, and I see that our audience is also putting in questions in the question box. But for now, I really would like to have the answer of Mrs. Pietikainen on the question she had in our panel.
Thank you very much, Virginie. Ms. Pietikainen, I revert to you with my question on asking you to elaborate further on your suggestions and share your concrete recommendations, which I was fortunate to hear in previous occasions, on the way forward in better mainstreaming environment, health and well-being in the European policies. Can you take the floor, please?
Thank you. Of course, this new program, Health for All, is a wonderful possibility there. But what I'm sort of seeing lacking is that we have the Green Deal and we have Health for All program. And I hope that this planetary health, One Health, could be a program, a roadmap, whatever you wish to be delivered from the Commission. Then if you go a bit in detail, in this kind of a program, I think that it would be important to show the linkage, what we have been discussing with the excellent presentation quite a lot, be it biodiversity, chemical cocktails, air quality, the way how we eat or work or how our cities are planned, and then the linkage to health, to make it visible, and to link also the ambition levels and the targets what we have, for example, be it in biodiversity or be it in cities or be it by the urban air quality, and to say that this is a health policy also. We would need to have a indicator and to have the measurement in our semesters in member states to see how our member states are doing in these issues. So how are you improving this kind of a broader health concept? But then again, and this is what I'm leaving very much for discussion and to the next steps, you do not get anything during the politics if you do not get support. And personally, I found that there's very weak or fragile link of discussion between environmental NGOs and health NGOs and then different patient organizations. How could we build or this kind of a platform or health, one planetary health or health for all, where we could engage both the environmental NGOs and the health and patient organizations to work together and to create that kind of a political pressure. And you can imagine that the numbers are pretty great. And then again, we do have the researchers, we have the industries, and we do have the doctors and other medicinal experts organizations. How we can join them on this kind of a discussion? Because I think that those of us that have went through this discussion already, we know the subject. But if you go to normal media or normal member of the parliament in member state or wherever, it isn't quite clear, and we would need to do a lot of this kind of a campaigning, public awareness building, and media programs, so that we could get quite a number of journalists in our member states and EU-wide to write about this issue. Plus, then last but not least, the urgency, because the amount of media coverage and the urgency for COVID-19, quite rightly. But if you think of the climate change, about 60,000 yearly premature deaths because caused by poor air quality in our urban areas every year. If we look all the other issues, there is clearly a urgency for our planetary health and people's health to act, and just to mention the endocrine disruptors. This is irreversible development that we are causing to our children day in, day out. And so we would need to act there pretty soon, because then we really certainly don't want, if you want to a bit lighter answer to a serious question, we do not have the future generation being 10 or 20% dumber or more stupid than what we are, because then green disruptors are impacting our intellectual development in our children too. Thank you.
And Ms. Pietikainen, thank you very much. I would like to use the chance while we are still having Mr. Andriukaitis to give the floor to our panelists if they wish to reflect on each other's interventions while we are waiting to receive the questions from our audience. You can either use the participants panel to raise your hand there, or you can actively raise it. Unfortunately, I don't see all of us at the same time. So I'm giving the floor now to Ms. Paulus, and it's better to use the participants panel as she did. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm very excited that so many people are so engaged in this issue, because I think this is really, this must be a cross-party approach, and we need to build compromises within our political groups, which is maybe easier in some groups than in other groups. But especially since Sirpa mentioned the example of the endocrine disrupting chemicals, because this is such a blatant example where we don't even have a coherent approach in EU environmental law when it comes to these substances. So they are regulated under REACH in another way than under the Pesticides Directive, and they're still in another way under the Emissions Directive. And so we urgently need a consistent approach on this. And I'd even go so far to say, well, why don't we just look at what the WHO has published on coming out of the corona crisis? Their prescriptions, which they published, I think in May, were protect nature, ensure energy transition in order to bring down air pollution, stop using taxpayers' money to fund pollution and fossil subsidies, build healthy cities, promote healthy, sustainable food systems, and invest in essential services, water, sanitation, clean energy, and so forth, in healthcare facilities. And I think you're absolutely right that Europe, of course, is a leader when it comes to environmental legislation. But unfortunately, we're not the leader yet at enforcement. We have wonderful laws when it comes to the protection of our waterways, of our drinking water, of our healthy food systems, but we are lacking the enforcement in nearly all member states. I haven't been a member of parliament for very long now, but what I take home for reading for the weekend is always the latest report from the European Court of Auditors. And there you can see the shortcomings of our legislation. We must make sure that our laws are enforced and our citizens are protected. Thank you.
You are all championing a broad and bold vision when it comes to health and well-being. I saw that 2 participants raise hand. Well, okay, that's fine, because a lot of our participants also were asking us questions. So I think we'll now give them the opportunity to ask their questions. And you, dear panelists, can also still share your vision and opinion then, if that is okay for you. So maybe let's have a look at the questions our participants were giving in our question box. The first question is a question on the actual content of the zero pollution ambition. Whether you could share one concrete measure the Commission is already considering at this stage about each compartment. So think air, water and soil. So I think this is a question for Mr. François Wakkenhut.
Thank you. Indeed, I was asking for the floor to get into the debate, so I'll use the opportunity to do that as well. But I'll start with your question. Well, as you know, we have a very clear process of consultations before we draw conclusions on what features in our proposals, and there will be an extensive consultation on zero pollution that will feed ideas, hopefully also ideas from this group and from the participants and members of the platform, that will enlighten and guide the work of the Commission in terms of what we will be doing. This said, there's also a number of commitments that has already been made in the European Green Deal under the zero pollution ambition. So those will obviously be part of the zero pollution action plan journey. If you refer to the European Green Deal, I mean, you have an annex that includes action specifically on clean air, on water, on industrial emissions, and there is obviously our work on chemicals that is also under zero pollution. So those will go ahead, and then there's clearly the need to define on the integrated approach to the zero pollution the best way forward in order to make a success of all this. But that we will not do before we've had proper consultations and we've had a very thorough listening exercise with all relevant stakeholders. And that's why I'm delighted to be here, because all the food for thought that we're getting from you will directly go into our reflection process. If you allow me, I just wanted to also make 2 small remarks based on the discussions earlier. One, on the question of urgency. There was a focus on urgency earlier, and I could not agree more about urgency when it comes to pollution. We also heard we've got 10 years to act on climate change, which is something that is also a level of urgency. But when it comes to pollution, the urgency is right now, because the health impacts are felt right now. And those health impacts need to be emphasized now. And the good news is that we can act on pollution and climate change through the same actions oftentimes, and creating, in doing so, co-benefits across the board. So I would like to insist on the fact that the health impacts are felt now, and the urgency is today rather than tomorrow. And that links to my second point, which is about enforcement. That was duly raised. There is an enforcement issue in a number of cases, and if I take clean air and ambient air quality legislation in particular, we have over 30 infringements that are ongoing with our member states. Over 30, you heard me well. And that is certainly something that is a concern for us, because we're never happy to go ahead with infringements as a solution, because it shows there's been a failure somewhere in the system. But I think that when we reflect also on stricter and more stringent standards, which is something that is part of the agenda, as obviously there are considerations that are to be made from a health perspective, we also need to reflect on how we can channel implementation in a way that will deliver results, because there's no merit in setting high ambition if nobody is actually following suit. And I'm not saying that this is not the case in the member states. There's a lot of work that is ongoing. But one particular issue that I would like to bring in that context that has not yet been brought about, we've talked a lot about horizontal integration across sectors, across health, environment, economic sectors, etc. But what we haven't talked about is integration in the vertical integration. There is an issue of consistency of action from the local to the regional to the national to the EU level. And that is very prevalent when it comes to clean air. What you often have is one hand that takes the right decision at a certain level, and another hand that's the opposite, the level above, or one hand that would like to act, but the other hand that prevents it from acting because the levers that are needed to act are not available. So I would like to also put that as part of the equation. This is part of the governance challenge that we face and that we also need to look at on the overall health and environment interface. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Wakanoot. Thank you very much. So we'll keep in mind the urgency, the enforcement, and the vertical integration that are very important. Thank you for answering also the question from Kala from Euro, one of the knowledge partners. So maybe let's have a look at the second question we had today. It's a question also from one of the knowledge partners. It's from Sheen from the European Health Futures Forum. A question addressing the panel. What are the critical considerations for success to link the Green Deal initiatives to have both a positive impact on the planet, so think about emissions, soil and biodiversity, and on human health and well-being. So this includes the zero pollution ambition, circular economy, greening the gap farm to fork, as well as a long-term vision for rural areas. So a question addressing the panel. Mrs. Setilena, who will we address the question first to?
I'll be very happy if someone takes the floor voluntarily on that question. Oh, we have Simona. You have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. I was trying to unmute myself. So it's a very interesting question. So what are the critical considerations for these policies to be successful? I will give a very broad answer to this question, but I think it's a very crucial one. And I think that a critical driver for success is engagement of all stakeholders. And here I'm talking about the policymakers who need to write down the law and the regulation it themselves, but also the stakeholders who need to ultimately implement these laws and regulations. And here I would like to make also a link to what Mrs. Paulus was mentioning, public support. I think this is a very crucial thing to keep in mind. As we all know, a successful stream for policy making is to gain support from the bottom to the top. When we think about policy making, we always have to think about three keys: the idea itself, so what we want to do, and in this case is I would say is to put health at the center of policy making. Then we need to solve an issue. We need to cope with a challenge, and in this case is air pollution, the need to have a zero pollution ambition, but also the economic recovery after the crisis. And then the third key it's to have leadership from policymakers, but also support from the public opinion. So to conclude, I think that to have successful strategies at the EU level, but also successful regulations that are implemented at the national level, we need all the stakeholders to be on board from the very beginning.
Well, thank you very much. Indeed, we need all stakeholders. And stakeholders, that also means the participants who had been asking their questions. So let's have a look at another question, ladies and gentlemen. You submitted in our question box. Here it comes. So what do you foresee the role of technology in achieving the vision of the biodiversity strategy for 2030? Is there any of the panelists eager to answer this question? Also, I think a very good one, the role of technology. Svetlina?
This is Sirpa Pietikäinen. I could try to have a go with the biodiversity.
Yes, go ahead, please.
There are tremendous possibilities with the new artificial intelligence and new, much more efficient methodologies how we can follow up the biodiversity. The Copernicus program is a wonderful example of that, and with that new kind of a supercomputer having measurements all over the Europe that could actually measure both the soil diversity, that is indeed very important, that we know very little about that, and the local biodiversity and its interlinkages in the ecosystem. It is a wonderful big EU program that hopefully is going to be compulsory part of data follow up. Indeed, like the same thing would be in air quality, not to have this kind of a robust figure of air quality on the city, but street by street and area by area. And by that way, at least the people could avoid, and we could intervene with the traffic, with the city planning. And so with the biodiversity, we could find a much more delicate picture what is the state of the biodiversity, plus then to fill up the Natura 2000 network, what are those kind of ecosystems to be preserved. Let's frankly see the fact that we actually do not have got the complete picture of the biodiversity with us yet.
Well, thank you very much. I saw that Mr. Andriukaitis also wanted to react on that question. Is that correct? I saw him raising his hand.
I think it is very important that we need to discuss in more details possibilities to use new technologies, artificial intelligence, and all new devices. It can help us really, assess real situation. I was very surprised when I saw in Italy, in one area, advanced farming, where you can see they use robotics, drones, artificial intelligence help them to understand meteorological situations, allow them to measure how many chemicals they can use in soil, when, what is about, about possibilities to follow diseases of plants and so on. I was so surprised how many options we can have in our hands. Speaking about agriculture, it will be absolutely friendly to biodiversity and to environment. Of course, when then speaking about smart cities and possibilities to use all smart technologies to monitor situation in every street, speaking about particle pollution and or about noise situation. Now, without technology, we can't really assess situation in big cities. Of course, we all saw especially good picture when COVID locked down big cities like in Beijing and so on. The air was absolutely different compared to time when a lot of cars were on the streets. But can you imagine how can we have possibilities to introduce smart regulatory environments in cities, achieving better conditions, air conditions, environmental conditions? This really very broad, panorama of possibilities to use digital instruments, robotics, artificial intelligence, drones, and so on, and testing laboratory, new devices, digital devices, following our goal to have zero pollution.
Hey. Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Andriukaitis. Indeed, having artificial intelligence, cities and drones to create more biodiversity. Let's have a look, ladies and gentlemen, at the next question you introduced in our question box. When it comes to environmental health research, it is underfunded. So how can EU policies make sure that future policies around exposure to air pollution, chemicals or unhealthy food will be well informed? And I don't know who of our panelists, dear Mrs. Vetelina, you would like to address this question to?
Much. I wonder whether some of the panelists would wish to take the floor. But when we are jumping to new questions, I just want to mention that I see more hands risen. So please give me a second to be able to give the floor to others. I would prefer, yes. So who is going to be interested to take this question? Okay, Mr. Andriukaitis, you have the floor.
Yes, please look at today's Commission proposal. From my side, when I was former Commissioner for Health, I had in my hands health program, and health program was only 430 million euros for 5 years. Now, today, Commission proposed to have in health program 9.54 billion euros. Can you imagine how many situations we can, address, keeping in mind much biggest financial package. Second issue is food, general food law. We propose to strengthen our EFSA capacities, and we decided to put more money related to research, and especially speaking about soil health, about situation with cocktail effects. We established so-called consortium of laboratories which can now deal with soil cocktails effects, and now you can put more money, keeping in mind new proposals of the Commission. I see good opportunities to finance such integrated researches or mission-driving initiatives using today's package which was proposed by the Commission. Of course, it depends on European Council or heads of states and governments. Do they accept it or not? But we need to press our government that they need to be more pro-European, speaking about European budget, about new multi-annual financial framework, and about proposal of Commission to put more financial investments into area of advanced researchers.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Andriukaitis. I saw that Mrs. Paulos also raised hand, but good news, we are having a question for you in a couple of moments. But first, dear Mrs. Svetelina, I would like to address the next question to you. So I hope you can help me out. We had in our question box the next question. So chemical strategy for sustainability is a key policy proposal to support health-enabling environments. So toxic chemicals, pollution make people and ecosystems more vulnerable, for example, by suppressing immune systems, for example, have a direct impact on species decline. It is one of the drivers of ecosystems losses and climate as well, as it hampers the circular economy. So zero pollution ambition cannot be achieved if you don't transform the chemicals production through the sustainable chemical strategy. Could you elaborate on how you would include it in the policy paper, for example? I think this is one for you yourself, Mrs. Svetelina.
Thank you very much. I wish it was really for me. I'm a lawyer and governance expert, and this is touching to the aspect of chemicals, which is dealt by other colleagues working on the paper. I'll be very happy to take this question and revert later on to the person who has asked it, unless a colleague of mine would wish to take the floor now. But I won't be able to elaborate on that at the moment. It's back to you, Virginie.
Okay, well...
I have Miss Paulus raising her hand on a different subject. Maybe it's a good moment to finally give her the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to very briefly elaborate on the, well, let's call it asymmetry between the funding of research. We have just in the last voting session in plenary the parliament has called for a special committee on beating cancer. And I have the distinct notion that this committee may put a lot of research in finding new medication, financing clinical trials for rare cancer, rare sorts of cancer, maybe even supporting patients' initiatives. But I don't think there will be quite as much money left in order to do research on the prevention of cancer. I mean, everybody knows about tobacco, processed red meat, and those things. But I think there might be a lot of other pollutants which are part of cancer development in humans and also, of course, in animal species. And I'm a little bit afraid that this special committee will focus a lot on horizon programs, which basically will support the health industry, but will not support environmental research. And I think that's really, really important that we get a substantial funding for this vital research, which we need for our survival. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And you're correct. We need research, and we owe our next generation a healthy planet as a healthy human being. Well, dear Mrs. Jutta Paulus, the next question is also a question for you. Let's have a look. So what does you think about the mandatory inclusion of health impacts in the EU laws?
Oh, I would really love that one, actually. I mean, there is the impact assessment, which has to be done for every new legislative proposal. But at least as far as I could perceive, there is no dedicated chapter on the health impacts of certain proposals. So if we would have robust indicators there saying, for example, how would this affect pollution? How would this, what would be with exposure of populations to the pollutants in question? What health risks could be attributed to the passing of this legislation, but also to not doing anything about the problem in question? Because I think that's often overlooked, that we are asking for, well, what impact will this legislation have? But we're not asking what impact will it have on our citizens if we don't legislate this issue. So I would very much like the health issue to be mandatory chapter in impact assessments. And I think we have great agencies on the European level who would be happy to contribute to that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, dear Mrs. Paulus. I think you made it very clear. Well, I would also like to say thank you to all our panelists. Thank you for your contributions, recommendations, your tips and tricks. I'll keep in mind, for example, the urgency. We really need the support of the public. We need leadership. We need vertical integration, artificial intelligence. You all give us a lot of interesting words to continue with. So maybe, dear Mrs. Pietikainen, you as a host of this event and member of the European Parliament, could you sum up what has been said? Give us your remarks, your final conclusions, please. Or maybe first let's go to Ms. Andrigades. So you also wanted to react on that?
Of course, of course. First of all, I would like to send a very important message today. Health in all policies is a holistic approach to health is not simple word. It is really a real example that we need to have political leadership at European Council of heads of states and heads of governments level. We need to those who can really now take lead and move forward, speaking about conference on future of Europe, speaking about today's multi-annual financial framework, speaking about possibilities to implement European recovery plan, and also keeping in mind Green Deal, SDGs, and climate change. We need now to really to restore people trust in European project, and health is the main common denominator which can really refresh people trust in EU project.
Very much for giving us these insights. Mrs. Svetlina, you as, let's say, the moderator of this panel, if I would like to ask you to take the floor to give us a little wrap-up, what would it be according to you?
Thank you very much. First, I want to express my gratitude to all the panelists. It was indeed a very interesting discussion, and I'm taking a lot back with me. And I very much look forward to our cooperation on the way forward. Indeed, it is about horizontal and vertical integration with the high political agenda being raised for better integration of environment, health and well-being, but at the same time the inclusion of all the stakeholders, not only at the EU level, but down to each community in the European Union. I would like to stop here, but indeed it was a very interesting debate. Thank you very much.
Well, and thank you, of course, for having accepted your role as a moderator of this panel discussion. I think we had a lot of challenges, but also a lot of opportunities ahead to go for better health and well-being of European citizens. So, dear Mrs. Pietikainen, you, as the host of the event and member of the European Parliament, I think it's time to give you the floor for the final speech and summary.
I won't even try to summarize this very rich discussion. And I would like to thank all the partners, the very interesting panel, of course, Mr. Andriukaitis, but also all the participants. And what is the positive signal, what I would like to bring back from this panel, is that we all seem to be very united on the bigger picture. We all seem to be finding the same elements and the same political purpose. So I think that this actually gave a good kickstart for one planetary health and our activities to work on this. So while I'm thanking for the participation, I would like this to be the first event when we work together on these issues, and wishing you a very nice summer and hope to see you in physically too in the autumn and continue this work. So thank you very much. And thank you for our wonderful leaders of the discussion. You facilitated it wonderfully. Bye now and a good summer.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Pietikainen. For you also a very nice and healthy summer. As for all our panelists we had here today, thank you very much for putting really health and well-being at the heart of the EU policy making. And I really could feel your passion and engagement when it comes to a better EU health and citizens' health. So thank you very much. I wish you all the best and hope to see you in healthy conditions back again. But also very important, ladies and gentlemen, is thank you for having been here today, for having dropped your questions in our question box as a participants. You must know that we will share also this policy paper with all of you. So please spread the word, join the tribe, join the initiative, and why not write your member of parliament. For the rest, I would like also to wish you a very beautiful, sunny and healthy summer. So stay safe and healthy and hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.
empty house.